I'm Steven Bartlett and we are here at Flight Story HQ in central London. I'm an investor, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm the host of the Diary of a CEO podcast. Diary of a CEO is me following my wide-ranging curiosity to find answers to things that I care about. And I think actually there's much of the clues in the name, the Diary of a CEO. So when I started, I was a CEO, and I asked myself, what would one find in the diary of a person in that position? And one might think it's like P&Ls and scribbles about numbers and stuff like that, but actually you'd find a really human story. You'd find someone who's in an interesting role, in a position, but struggling with all the same things that you're struggling with in your life. And so in the podcast, I endeavor to go a little bit deeper with people to understand why it is that they do what they do, what's really behind the scenes, and ultimately, I guess, what would be written in their diary if we were lucky enough to be able to see it. And it's really expanded beyond there, because the things that I think about in my diary are everything from my gut health to my mental health to my neuroscience to my relationships to my love life to my sex life. And so the show's ended up exploring all of these wide-ranging subjects, and yeah, I love it. It's really a passion project that turned to something much more. I was born in Botswana, which is near the south of Africa, and I came to the UK when I was a kid. My mother's Nigerian and my father is English. I moved to Plymouth in the southwest of the UK, which is kind of like it's a very rural area. We were the only pretty much the only black family I ever came across growing up, but we moved to a middle class area, and we struggled with money for various reasons. And I always had this orientation towards business and making money and building stuff. When I think back to being a kid, I used to go to my dad's printer, take his paper out of the printer, and take a biro and write ones on the first sheet of paper, twos on the second sheet of paper, threes on the second sheet. I'd then cut it up into dollar bills, and then I'd give it to my brothers, and I'd tell them that they could come back to my bunk bed and spend that money on getting their feet massaged, their back tickled. I'd take my mum's like moisturizer, and I'd give them like massages on my bunk bed just to get all that paper back that I just gave them. And this is what I would do for fun. What I wouldn't do for fun is school. So I found it extremely hard to pay attention in school. I went back and spoke there once. I think her name was Mrs. Birchnell, came up to me and said, "You're a lovely guy, but you still owe me homework. You never did your homework." And that's the reflection of reality. I struggled to pay attention, which led me to spend so much of my time in school in exclusion, the little unit where you just look at the wall, and then to get expelled, but then unexpelled, in the words of my headmaster, because I made the school a lot of money from like the business stuff that I was doing, from the vending machine deals that I did for the school and from the school trips and stuff. Went to university, dropped out after one lecture because it was school again and I can't pay attention in school, and started my first business at 18. And that was Wool Park, which I did for about 2 years, up until the point that I discovered that the best way to get traffic to Wool Park was using this thing called social media, which people were quite pessimistic about at the time. So left my company abruptly to focus on social media content, this new attention economy, and that took me all over the world. So took me to San Francisco where I worked in technology, helping them use social media to grow applications, took me back to London, and ultimately it was a client of mine that turned around to me one day when I was 18, 19 and said, "What you're doing for us is amazing, do you want to turn it into a business?" I said no for the first couple of months because I'd been through a startup and there was still a little bit of startup PTSD there. But about 4 months later, I said yes and took the check, walked downstairs, paid it to the bank, and started what would become Social Chain. And that, for the next 5-6 years, took me all over the world. We had offices in Berlin, in London, in Manchester, in New York, and then I resigned from that, 27, joined Dragon's Den, decided to focus on the podcast when I was 27, started Flight Story, started my fund, and here I am now. I saw it as the only way, my only chance to live the life that I wanted to live. Because objectively, I had what I'd consider bad grades relative to even my brothers, who were absolute boffins. I've not said that word in a couple of, you probably don't even know what that word means, do you?
No.
Do you know what boffin is?
No.
Okay, don't worry about it. They were very smart. And so you're always comparing yourself to the context in which you are. So I thought of myself as not being smart because they were really smart, and I'm not that good at maths, I'm not that good at English. In terms of writing and spelling, or at least I wasn't then. So I thought, well, the only way that I'm going to get to live a free life is if I create it myself. And this is also part of the reason why I dropped out of university, because I asked myself the question, who am I going to show this piece of paper to if I want to work for myself? And also the other thing, which kind of speaks to what you're saying, is I just didn't know. I didn't know what the word entrepreneur was when I started my first business. I didn't know how hard it was. Maybe there was a element of like necessary delusion in thinking that I could have an idea, and then there was nothing between me and the realization of that idea. And it's probably the thing I always think about is the single most important trait I had wasn't like smarts or intelligence, or I didn't have parents that could give me any money or anything like that. The single trait I had was a healthy dose of delusion. And that delusion is sometimes also referred to as self-belief. Like, I didn't think there was anything between where I am now and where I wanted to be. I couldn't see a thing. It was just whether I wanted it or not. So that's why I started the first time. And it was, I would say, painful. But I just never felt like I had a plan B. I've always in my head thought that my life would go one way, and there was never an alternative path. So it's funny because I think back to the way I was behaving when I was 18. So I've called my mother, I've told her I'm dropping out university. I'm the only child that did that. So I'm disowned, and I'm in Manchester, I'm broke. I've got 2 CCJs I managed to collect, which is, it sounds like a qualification. It's like the closest thing I came to a qualification. It's actually a county court judgment, which is when they're coming for you because you owe them a lot of debt. And in that moment, I was videoing the bailiff letters that I had. I was documenting. I was like, look how many bailiff letters I've got. I was opening my fridge and I was going, look, there's nothing in it. And then I was filming myself as if I was shooting a documentary. And in that, it's like bizarre behavior because you would expect someone in such a situation to be like despairing. But my mindset was that this was an interesting story I was going to tell one day. And actually, I think it's that mindset that gets you out of that situation, because I really think you can make heaven out of hell or hell out of heaven, depending how you think about a situation. So my favorite quote ever, because it just like hit me like a ton of bricks many years later, is those that think they can and those that think they can't are both usually right. And people think, well, if you're capable, you believe you can. No, it's because belief itself is the escape velocity of any hell or prison that you're in, for many of us. So I started because I didn't have a plan B, and I was desperate for, maybe through shame or insecurity because of what I said earlier about being the black kid and the poor kid in my context. I was desperate to fill that gap, that hole in me, which was the sort of like subtle background murmur of shame my whole childhood. And the way that I thought I could fill it was the validation from like doing something great with myself, or getting the money that was always like the thing causing me awkwardness as a kid, like not having the money. Or so whatever the like motivation was, whether I was being dragged or I was driven, I think the two are like indistinguishable. There was enough energy that pushed me through all of those, the hard stuff where like people tell you no, and you don't feel like you're making any progress at all. So I started Social Chain when I was 21 years old in London, and then very quickly we moved to Manchester for a variety of reasons. It was a really talent-centric business, and most of the talent that we were looking for were in Manchester. In fact, Lad Bible, Unilad, Jungle Creations, Social Chain, and our sister company Media Chain, we all literally came from the same street. So like Jungle Creations was my first employee at Wall Park. He met me in a pub and said, can I use those social media pages, this is Jamie Boulding, to build my own social media pages? That became a new media empire. Solly and Arian were down the road building Lad Bible. Alex built Unilad and Lad Bible, then sold one of them to Solly, and then Alex came and worked at Social Chain. So there was like 5 people that built this whole like new media ecosystem in the UK, and we all knew each other. So we went to Manchester, built that business for a couple of years, and then an investor came along and invested more money. He became a majority shareholder. The business got to around 25 million in revenue between the UK team and the New York team. And then we merged with a company called Lummerland, making us a public company. I then became co-CEOs with the guy called Wanya Oberhoff. And for the next 3 to 4 years, we went on an acquisition spree, acquiring companies all over the world. In 2019 or 20, I'm thinking about, the pandemic is like how I know everything. So I resigned in 2020. So in 2020, we were about to uplist again to another stock exchange called the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. And right before then, I resigned because I had lost control of the company. So I could no longer make the decisions that I wanted to make. And that was the end of my journey. And Social Chain, at the point when I'd left, was a marketing empire and an e-commerce business that were endeavoring to work together. So the social media, the marketing empire was trying to accelerate all of our e-commerce companies. And that was the mission when I stepped down in 2020, roughly around August. It was like this little side project that I had that I wasn't paying much attention to. So we weren't videoing it then, and I was uploading once in a while. So there wasn't really an upload schedule. There also really wasn't a team. At the start, it was me in my bedroom speaking into a camera every Sunday night in the early hours of the morning to myself when I could find time. And it was when I resigned from Social Chain that I asked myself a really important question, which is, if I could do anything now, because now I have the money and I can do what I want with my life, I could retire, I could go and do something philanthropic, or I could, I don't know, sew or knit or whatever. If I could do anything, what would I do irrespective of money? And the answer that was like loud and clear in my brain was that little podcast thing you started would be the thing, because you enjoyed it the most. It's a thing that made you feel like you were in like a state of flow. And so I called a guy called Jack, who had, I think, recorded a few episodes with me previously as a production assistant. And I said, what are you doing with your life? Do you want to, I'll find a place in London. Me and you will go there. We'll basically live there. And we'll start the Diary of a CEO. So I found a place on Rightmove. I didn't necessarily even view it. I just knew that it looked like it would be a good set. Moved myself there in 2020, 2021. Jack came to me with a list of camera equipment that we would need, and it was like £4,000. And I was like, I don't think you understand. We are going all in. So you come back to me again with a real budget. And he came back to me with a budget of like £50,000, and I was like, you are fired. I'm joking. I was like, let's do this. And so we had like 8 cameras, like a robot camera that just like moved itself up and down the floor. Like we had GoPros in the lift and everything. And I think that was important because it told me, it told him, and it told Sophie, who was there as well, who's my assistant over there, that we were really serious about this thing. And that was about 4 years ago. I just loved doing it. And it tends to be the case that if passion precedes the thing, then you're going to invest a certain level of obsession. And the way I think in terms of principles, so I thought if I start obsessing over the principles of this thing, it won't take long for it to start compounding in our favor. And what I mean by that is 2 of the most used phrases in our company, and still to this day, are the phrase 1%, which is an obsession about the tiniest details. And the second one is the word failure, which is our job is to increase the rate of failure, i.e. increase the number of experiments that we're doing. And if you just do those 2 things, and if you have so much passion as the sort of fuel in the engine, all you need is patience. And that's what we could see. We could see very early on that we were out carrying the competition on the tiniest little details, and we were willing to test more things. And you might think like, those are words, but if you understood the reality, you would think that I was a psychopath. So I tend to think in terms of principles because a strategy is useful, but it like decays, it's ephemeral. So a strategy is like me giving you a fish. But if I give you a principle, it's like me giving you the fishing rod, so you can fish for yourself forever. And one of the principles is that in the world we live in today, where the correct answer is changing faster and faster and faster, if you listen to futurists, they say that if you're 40 today, by the age of 60, you'll experience a year's change in 90 days. If you're 11 today, by the age of 60, you'll experience a year's change in 11 days. So we all agree that the correct answer in technology is accelerating, which means the correct answer to anything, to how to shoot an interview, to how to make a podcast, to which platform to use, to where to put the meme bar on the video, what the title should be, what the color should be, because people start using dark mode on YouTube. So does that impact the color contrast of videos and thumbnails? So if you just understand that as like a principle, then the way to find the correct answer before everybody else is to increase your rate of experimentation. So here we have a full-time failure and experimentation team. So like Grace is the head of failure and experimentation. Her job is to make everybody fail faster, conduct more experiments so that we can fail faster, because failure is feedback, feedback is knowledge, and knowledge is power. So our rate of failure will correlate to our rate of success, ultimately our rate of power. So we have data scientists here to help us measure our experiments. We're looking at every single metric because we found changing 10 seconds to a conversation like this, and I can tell you which 10 seconds will increase the subscription rate on your YouTube channel by 350%, because that's what we found. And we know the impact that exclamation marks have, or quotation marks will have on the title on Apple Podcast hosting platform, or the optimal length of a trailer and how long is too long and how long is too short. All of these things in the modern world can be tested now because we exist on platforms and technology where you can A/B test things. So our principle is to kill the guessing everywhere that we can. And a lot of people don't like to do that because in creative industries, you be romantic about your perspective. But my perspective is that I'd rather, if I sat down with you and I interviewed you for 3 hours, the thing I care about most is that the world gets to see the conversation and the conversation reaches its potential. What a great shame it would be that if we had the most incredible conversation, me interviewing you for 3 hours, and then we got the title wrong or the thumbnail wrong. And because of that, 1,900% less people saw it. Now that sounds like a very specific number I've chosen there, but that was the variance in the last podcast we released between the best performing test and the worst performing test. So if we had just guessed, there's a probability that we could have accidentally hurt the potential of the conversation. So testing is the answer. And actually, I have to say, it's a much nicer way to live because you don't have to argue as much. You don't have to debate as much when you're testing everything. And it was the same with my book. Got the book cover, made 40 different front covers for the book. And instead of me going, I think, we tested all 40 in various environments to see what cover was most compelling to people. Your testing journey is going to start very simple, and it's going to start simple because you probably don't have many people or many resources when you're first starting out. But at the very top of that testing journey is we build our own testing platform. So we've built something called Pre-Watch, where before the conversation comes out, we have 1,000 people watch the conversation. They've signed up to have their eyes tracked, and if they hit the space bar on the keyboard, then it means that they found that part interesting. But if they look away, we also get that data as well. And so from that, what we get in the back end is we get the YouTube retention graph before we publish, which means we can edit to make the conversation more compelling. So that's the very top end. But at the very bottom end, what you can do is you can just send something to your friends in WhatsApp. This is a very simple way, and ask them in your friend's WhatsApp group to individually message you directly. Don't respond in the group because of groupthink. Individually message you directly and tell you which they prefer. Very simple. And actually, the most important thing is to embody the mentality of just whenever you have a decision to make as it relates to your content, your book, your business, your marketing, your social media, your products, anything, product design, whatever it might be, your first thought should be, the first thing that your brain says is, how can I test this? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you go with whatever the test says, but you get the test data back and you say, okay, so this is the top 10. Maybe I want the third one. Maybe the first one doesn't resonate. Maybe the second one isn't quite right. Maybe the third one works for me. And it's all about making sure that your work reaches its potential. Because having been in the creative industries for a long time, so much great work, so many great artists never get the credit they deserve because there's a tiny decision made with how it's packaged or with how it's presented that holds the world back from being able to experience the true value of that art or creativity. So we just want to get that out of the way. When we first started testing the Diary of a CEO, when I first started the show, we put my face in the thumbnail. And after doing a bunch of tests, we actually figured out that having my face in the thumbnail made people click less because people didn't, at this point in the early days, really know who I was, as much because the show wasn't big. So that's what we'd always believed. And then in the last 4 months, putting me back into the thumbnail, which you would have seen on my channel, means that that's flipped now and people click more. But even small things like, which side am I on? Am I on the left side of the thumbnail or the right side of the thumbnail? Has a big impact consistently. If I'm smiling or if I'm not smiling. A weird one from last week is if you can see my hand in the thumbnail, it performs better. Like, so usually the thumbnails are this, so you just see faces, but if you can see a little bit of my hand, it performs better over and over and over and over again. I'd say the other thing we've come to learn from our testing is testing is almost a reflection of the human brain in an interesting way. So you learn a lot about human beings by running thousands of tests a week, and we run thousands of tests a week. One of the things I've learned is that the more specific something is, the more compelling it is. So if I said 70%, it is less compelling than if I say 69.3%. And the variance on anything that's specific is tremendous. So even when you're thinking about this particular interview we're having now, the more specific the title is, to the point that it like perks the like cognition of the brain, the better it's performed over time, and that's surprising to me. And then also I've just learned that the brain is very good and is actually endeavoring at all times to not pay attention to things. It's trying to find themes and words that are cliche so it can conserve its energy. So like the word revolutionary, for example, is something that I'd learned from just studying it. The word revolution, when it first came out like 50, 60 years ago, and people started using it in like the public discourse, it was incredibly effective as a word. But then if you go forward 50 years in this study and they start looking at magazines, and they eventually 50 years later, people are using it to describe sofas, and the word no longer works. And so I'm quite fascinated by how words have this emotional power over us and this resonance over us, but also words have an expiration date. And that's something I've learned from the testing that we see as well. It's just the power of words, and just small differentiations to words can have a profound impact. The most important thing is, do I want to sit down with this person for 4 hours and speak to them? Because I'm very, very busy, there's lots of things going on. So for me to sit down for 4 hours and have a conversation where I'm transfixed and I'm not like falling asleep like I used to in school because I'm not interested, the most important thing is that I'm really interested in this subject. I've got a set of questions about this person and what they do or what they studied or what they know that I am desperate to find out. That's number one. And then the other circle that comes into my thinking is, based on everything I know about my audience and all the feedback that they've given me, what is it that they really want? The third thing is what the data tells us that the audience consistently respond to. And I always say to my team, I kind of see it like these 3 circles. And where they overlap, my curiosity, what my audience want, and what the data says, that sweet spot in the middle is the perfect guest. It all comes down to people, really. And this is, the further I've got in my career, when I started in business when I was 18, 19, 20, I thought the game was, if I work Saturday and Sunday really, really, really hard, and I have the fortune of a couple of good ideas, I will be successful. And I say that because I know, even if they don't admit it, because now I have this portfolio of companies and many of them are run by first-time founders, that is the bias that most first-time founders have. They actually, somewhere deep down, think that the game is about them. What I came to learn after 10 years of making mistakes and building businesses, and what I've really implemented here now, because I literally think of myself as the head of recruitment here, and my team will understand that, because this week I've spent about 30 to 40 hours on recruitment. When I was in the back room there getting my makeup done for this interview, right, someone applied for a job. I called them within 3 minutes. They're an 18-year-old at LSE who wants an internship. I called them within 3 minutes. It's Saturday here. I'm recruiting 7 days a week till 3 a.m. at night every night, and it's my absolute obsession. What's changed? I realized that the game I'm actually playing, the first foundation of this whole thing called business, is not how good I am. It is my ability to attract exceptional people to come and work here. And then job 2 is to bind them with a culture that makes them do the best work of their life. And job number 3 is to set them a vision that is important and worthwhile. That is like the actual game that founders are playing. So when you look at my diary and my schedule, it should be reflected, those priorities should be reflected with my time. So I spend like 30 hours a week on recruitment. I like built the recruitment survey that we use. I'm constantly refining the recruitment process. I'm doing it 7 days a week. I did it this morning before I got to this building. I did it in there while I was talking about recruitment all the way up till sitting in this chair. Because the game here is what Steve Jobs discovered once upon a time. Steve Jobs said, people think I've built my career on me, but actually what I've done is I've gone to the extraordinary lengths of hiring truly exceptional people. And when you do that, this crazy thing happens. It propagates. Because exceptional people want to work only with exceptional people. And they don't want to work with people that aren't exceptional. That's the game. And I'm so passionate about this because no one told me. And I think founders could save themselves so much hurt and pain and failure and anxiety and worry and confusion if they realize that they should be spending 20 times more hours per week on just meeting people and professional flirting, which is persuading people to come and join them on their mission. Yeah, so one of them is deep expertise on the subject matter, usually because they've experienced the problem. So they were working in banking for 10 years, they think it can be done better, so now they want to do it. And sort of correlated to that is passion, which is when I was talking earlier about like the activation energy to get past all of the hurdles you'll go through in business, all of the no's, all of that stuff. Passion and like a certain level of delusion and insanity and having no other choice really because you're so pulled by solving this thing is imperative. Because one, it comes back to principles. What do I know, irrespective of me knowing this challenge or this industry, what do I know they're going to go through? I know that it's going to be hard, so we need passion, right? And we need like deep expertise. I also know that they're going to be wrong. So their hypothesis, you think about how many all these successful businesses, look at their initial hypothesis, what they thought the business was going to be versus the thing that made $1 billion. It's almost never the same. So how are they going to deal with being wrong? So I'm looking for humility, hard work, humility. And I'll give you one more. I'm looking for a bias towards optimism, which is find a way, everything is figure-outable, we can do this mindset. And I'm going to add another one as a bonus one. This is something I learned from Barbara Cochran, the shark on Shark Tank in the USA. She said, my best founders are typically people that have been through hard things in their early life. And she goes, when they call me, my best founders, they call me telling me the problem that they're having, but they call me with the solution attached. And she said, my worst founders that haven't been through hard things in their life, they call me with the problem, but with no solution attached. And she says in our hallway where she's got all their faces, she just turns their face upside down if they don't call her with a solution attached. And I think there's something to that, which is being solution orientated. And some people do that. They're like hardworking, highly passionate, highly humble, solution orientated optimists. And so those are the core components, I think, of being able to survive the storm that is building a startup. So there's two really interesting things that have happened in the world, I think, over the last couple of years, and it pertains to media and investing. So on the media side of things, once upon a time, media and attention was owned really by a couple of families. And these families had the microphone, the megaphone. And because of what happened with the internet and social media, which was the first sort of industry I built my career in, everything became more decentralized to the point that both you and me right now are publishers, whether we realize it or not, whether we're like leaning into that or not. We have the tools that we need to scale. In the case of my new friend, Mr. Beast, billions and billions and billions he's getting, I think it's something like 4 billion views a month using tools that we could all buy, frankly, in a supermarket now. And this is like unheard of. And I don't think we realize how significant this change is for suddenly to be in a world where we all have a megaphone and we can scale that megaphone. So that's what's gone on with media. And at the same time, with all of this sort of expansion of platforms, there are increasingly more platforms. There's been 50% more major social networks in the last 10 years that have tens and tens of millions of users. It's becoming more decentralized on this end. And the thing that's not going out of fashion in a world of AI is human-to-human relationships. So I really, really believe that the future of media is human-led, human-hosted IP with an ecosystem built around it. And this is what we're seeing with the Alex Coopers of the world, or the Andrew Hubermans of the world, or the Mel Robbins of the world. We're seeing this individual be at the center of this huge IP ecosystem that's emerging. And this is an incredible opportunity. And one of the things that has happened because of this is in the investing world, the best founders of our time that are building exceptional B2C and B2B companies, they no longer want money from men in suits. They want something more. They want the most important thing for their business, which is growth. And the path to growth is in this attention economy. So what we're seeing now is some of the best companies that are emerging are turning to the likes of KSI or an Alex Cooper or a Joe Rogan to be their investor, because those people can give something which is much more valuable than money, which is attention. So now all of these individuals, whether it's your Ryan Reynolds of the world or your Prime Hydrations of the world, they're all now investors. And what Flight Story endeavors to do is to bring these two worlds together, to bring some of the best voices in the world who are aspiring to drive a healthier, happier humanity, together with some of the best founders in the world who are building that happier, healthier future. And together, we believe that we can give them the tools to make 1 + 1 = 3. And that's essentially what Flight Story is. It's an investment company, and it's a media company that work synergetically together to scale human-centered IP and build engaged audiences, speaking to subjects that drive a happier, healthy humanity. And we leverage that attention and our capital to create companies that also drive a happier, healthier humanity. One of the things that I'm thinking a lot about is about decentralization. And I talked about it then, but as a podcaster, typically you might be on Apple and Spotify, right? And new podcasters and video podcasters are also adding YouTube into that mix. But if you think about the stat I said a second ago, there's 50% more social networks now that have tens of millions of active users now. So play it forward. Play it forward another 10 years or another 20 years or whatever. And what's going to end up happening is what we were predicting 7 or 8 years ago, but I didn't understand what the catalyst would be. The catalyst ended up being politics, right? There's going to be even more social networks, and they're going to be even more niche. And actually, in a world of AI where coding becomes even easier, it's going to become even easier to create your own little social network for your neighborhood, your friendship group, your work colleagues, or your football team. And that's kind of the world I see. So how do I take a 3-hour conversation and how do I present it in 40 different formats, in 40 different environments to make sure that it can exist in a decentralized manner? And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. No longer do I have to be on one TV show or one radio show to get my message out there. The future looks more like any of us can be on 40 different platforms at the same time. And actually that's going to be the most effective way to get our message out there. So that's the big thing I'm thinking about, decentralization. And the Diary of a CEO is, because of that, we hired someone just to do that. So that means we're now on 12 airlines. I think we're the first podcast in the world to be on airlines in video alongside, Fox News and a lot of the famous studios around the world. We're in prisons in the UK. So prison inmates in the UK can watch the show on their little handheld devices. We are at military facilities in the UK. We're hoping to be on gym equipment. Anywhere where there's a screen, we should endeavor to have our show and our content. So that's a big idea that I'm thinking about. The other one is one we've been thinking about for the last 10 years since I started in social media, and I saw what I call, I'm going to call it Facebook Zero, because that's what I used to call it, which is we saw that the natural trend of any social media platform, really any platform, is gradually your organic reach is taken away from you. And back in the day when we looked at our company and Lad Bibles and all of our competitors, Jungle Creations, etc., we could see almost perfectly every year we were losing 50% of our organic reach. So you play it forward. And you understand why it's happening. You go, okay, these are public companies. They've got to report their earnings every quarter, which means they need to sell more ads. And ultimately, there's a limited amount of attention. So the ads are basically taking more attention and we're being squeezed out. So if we play this forward, the most important game to be playing is to have a direct relationship and own our audience. And this is why newsletters have survived the storm, because it's one of the only mediums that we're all engaged with. We all have to use email that allows you to have a direct relationship with your audience. So what are the other platforms that we can use to have a direct relationship with our audience so that a social media CEO can't make us pay to reach them? So I'm really interested in the mail. I'm really interested in SMS. I'm really interested in newsletters. I'm thinking a lot about AI and the radical impact that can have on podcasts. Because there's really 3 core components to building a good podcast. There's the voice element, there's the script or the content you could say, and then there's how do you grow it, right? So it's very difficult to grow a podcast in this day and age if you're not doing the video part. So with an AI podcast, it's how do we solve for the video part? Anyway, TLDR, we started experiments here with our experimentation team and a separate team that I call Flight X, which is my little special projects team, who are trying to kill the main business. So their job is to disrupt the main business, because if you don't disrupt yourself, then someone else is gonna. That's what history tells us. They call it the innovator's dilemma. So their job has been to build AI podcasts that are better received, better retaining in terms of retention than our current shows. So one of the things they did, it goes back to these 3 points that I said, is they started a new show using me, although I didn't record it, I didn't write it, even the artwork wasn't created by me, wasn't published by me, and it's live, and it's doing very, very well. And again, you just play forward any expected rate of improvement. Let it improve let the writing part, the content writing part that AI did improve by 5% a year or 5% a month. It's really improving by about 10% a month. Let the voice, the speech part get better by 5% every month. And eventually you have yourself in a place where it is incomparable and equal to me sat with 9 cameras around me flying across the world to interview someone. And actually, if I can literally play it for you. Could you pass me my phone? So I played this for my girlfriend and I didn't tell her that it wasn't me and that I hadn't recorded it. And she had no idea. So I'd be pretty surprised if you could tell the difference. But this is live. This podcast is made purely with AI. It's live on Spotify now. It has a fantastic rating on Spotify. It's got like 4.6 stars on Spotify. The comments are great. The retention is 60% of people get to the end of it. And it's an hour-long podcast in my voice, written by AI, voiced by AI, but in my voice, and published by AI. And so when you think, you play this forward, you go, well, we could create, theoretically, using this technology, thousands of shows from one computer, theoretically with one person. And these things always seem like they're never going to happen, but because new innovations, in many ways, they start worse than the current dominant innovation. So when you think about the horse and car industry, the reason why every horse CEO back in the 1800s dismissed the cars was because they were way more expensive, way slower. There was a law called the red flag law where you had to walk in front of it with a red flag. They broke down all the time. So people dismissed it and said it will never get there. But the key thing to look at in these moments is the rate of improvement. How much more can Steve Bartlett improve as a human host? Not much. How much more could the AI improve, and will it improve over just the next 5 years? Profoundly. So when the new S-curve comes in, it's always below the old S-curve. And then, so this is the old one. The old one goes like this. This is Steven Bartlett as a host and using normal cameras. The new S-curve comes in below. It starts worse. But the rate of improvement significantly exceeds it, which means ultimately it becomes the dominant technology. So if I play this podcast, this is the one that AI did. A revolution. Inside that garage, a whirlwind of activity unfolds. The scent of solder and fresh wood mingles in the air, illuminated by the soft glow of hanging fluorescent lights. Amidst a lamp... That's me. It's got 4.6 stars on Apple. They know it's AI, and this is the crazy part, because it literally says on the thumbnail, made by AI, and all the comments are like, can you slow the AI down just a little bit?
Does that scare you at all?
Okay, good question. Good question, because absolutely yes, but what's even more scary is someone else doing it. Right. And this is always the thing with innovation. You've got to realize that there's always a bulldozer coming for you. It's coming for you, it's coming for me, it's coming for everybody listening. And you have a choice, history shows us, to either be hit by the bulldozer or to drive the bulldozer and run old you over. And as they look back through history in one of my favorite books called The Innovator's Dilemma, really irrespective of industry, whether it's digging excavators or micro memory disks or whatever, whoever's currently dominant and doing well at the thing, they always focus on what their current customer base are asking for. So if we go back to the horse analogy, if I was the CEO of a horse company, every single one of my customers, what did they want? Faster, more comfortable horses. That's what they were demanding me for. And every single employee and team member I had, what did they know? What did they qualify in? Horses. And my supply chain is set up to do horses. So when my colleague comes to me and says, listen, there's this thing called cars, I go, are any of our customers asking for cars? No one in my comment section has ever said, by the way, Steve, can we have some AI podcasts? No one ever. None of my sponsors on the show have ever gone, we'd really love to sponsor some AI podcasts. So when I understand that, and I have the full picture of like how history plays out, I go, we've got to lean in early when it feels bizarre, and we've got to start experimenting and messing around, because Steven Bartlett at 18, with that little social media thing, was naive. He didn't know how the old world worked of marketing. So he leaned in and started messing around. And this is what I tell my kids if I had kids today. Hopefully I'll have some soon. I will tell them, I'm really not that bothered about like what you study or whatever, but the most important thing to own a rapidly accelerating future is to lean into bizarre behavior. When something makes you feel a bit weird, when it goes against what you think you know, lean in. And especially if there's lots of pessimists, because pessimism correlates to disruption. I.e., the more people that are slightly pissed off and criticizing the thing probably relates to the amount of people who are experiencing the cognitive dissonance of, oh my God, I think this thing's gonna kill my job. So there's probably a big opportunity for disruption there. So yes, I'm scared, but what do you do with that energy? Do you like ostrich in the sand it, or do you do something about it?